So I've just come across an article talking about the release of Dimmu Borgir's Puritanical Euphoric Myisanthropia remix and remastered album. It's a classic record, and it's one of my favorite records ever produced. Released all the way back in 2001 on Nuclear Blast, and it was my introduction to the band, quite frankly. Um, yeah, I mean, talk about an excellent record. I guess it's like Dimmu Borgir's. I don't know whether to call it their Black Album or their Master of Puppets. It's probably their Black Album, I guess, in some ways. Although it's probably remembered better than the Black Album is by many fans of Metallica. But certainly from a production standpoint, I just remember being completely blown away by that record when it came out. The pure power of the production, the mix, the balance with the orchestra, in terms of the use of keyboards, things like that. Everything just gelled. It was just the right amount of upfront crunchy guitar, just the right amount of kick from the drums, and yeah, I mean the record just changed my outlook on production. It changed my outlook on how big and meaty and weighty you could get a sound and still have clarity and musicality to it. And it had a special mix of ingredients in terms of the lineup. I think most people would be in agreement to say that at that point we saw the introduction of the lineup as far as Dimmu Borgir is concerned. Shagrath on vocals, Selenos on guitar, Galder on the lead guitar, ICX Vortex on bass, and backing vocals, a key thing. It's a key dynamic that existed in the band at the time, was his clean vocal. And although they still put on fantastic shows, it's not quite the same without that guy in the mix. I understand bands need to make the choices they need to make if they can't get along with someone, or it's, they're unable to keep a professional environment, or whatever the problems are that mean that they end up parting ways. It's still a deep regret and sadness, I think, for most people that they couldn't have kept that lineup. And then, of course, they had Masters on keyboards. And for me, another personal highlight was Nick Barker on drums. And they've had fantastic drummers over the years. They've been a very fortunate band, I suppose, in that regard. Well, maybe not fortunate. I mean, you make your own luck, don't you? And, they put in the hard work and effort and made a reputation. So that's where they got the good drummers from. But Nick Barker, I guess there's some dramas, I suppose, that came with him allegedly, and things that were said in the press and so on, about the way I guess he wanted to live his lifestyle. But there's no disguising the fact that the guy was an absolute machine on the kit. Just an instrument of precision and taste. It's not just about speed. So, the little things that he would do. He'd have these blistering fills, but it wouldn't just be the drums. It would be his use of cymbals and coloration, particularly the way he would navigate effortlessly across between his crashes, the odd splash hit, and the way he would, use his ride in the middle of grooves as well, and stuff he would do on the hats as well, to be fair. Anyway, for me, that record just had just this perfect balance of elements of the contributing members and what they brought to the project. Again, as I said, there's the songwriting. The songwriting was there's a musicality to it, a size, a grand, epic nature to it, but it has just that right blend of brutality and the sort of beauty and contrast with terror, which I think is what makes, for me, that kind of makes a perfect Dimmu Borgir record. As much as I love records like Stormblast, and I mean, when it comes to remastering it and remixing it, most bands, I think, when they do a remaster and remix, a lot of times you just expect to get the same record pretty much just louder, in that respect, because in a lot of bands' cases, the records were made a long time ago. So when they bring it up to a modern standard, it's very easy to level the record up using modern compression techniques, and modern limiting techniques and that sort of thing. But Dimmu Borgir have showed in the past that they do more than that. Obviously, with Stormblast, that was a complete re-recording of it. And I know that there's some purists that will be like, no, I like the original. And that's fair enough, but I'm kind of more into the hi-fi sound rather than the lo-fi sound. Myself, personally, that's just my personal taste. And I can still enjoy the original, don't get me wrong, but I prefer the meatiness and the size and the weight and the cut and clarity of the 2006 version. So, with that being said, I had to listen to the Blessings Upon the Throne of Tyranny, which is like, I guess, the first kind of single, I don't know, or release that they've put out of this remix and remastered version. Now, I only got to hear it on my phone, which doesn't tell you a whole lot, but there are some things that were immediately noticeable. So one of the things is, and I'm not sure if this is positive or negative, I love the original so much that I'm not sure I think it needs updating or tampering with. However, I've noticed that there's a lot more clarity to the vocals. Now, it could just be my phone bringing out the mid-range, but I don't think so. It sounds to me like the vocals are much more kind of upfront and there's clarity. I think there's positives and negatives to that, actually, because one of the things I liked about black metal and symphonic black metal in particular is they weren't afraid to have the vocals be more of a texture, a featuring texture, and have sit in the mix much like any other instrument does, and maybe not take the conventional, more pop or rock route of making sure the vocals are like really up front. So, but that being said, having listened to the track, there are things you hear in Shagrath's performance that I didn't hear before. There's definitely some detail there that, like, I've definitely listened to that record, the original, on my phone before, or through a phone speaker. And yeah, I'm definitely sure that there's definitely there's probably like doubled tracks and things like that, or like backing tracks, supporting tracks that they recorded to back up the main vocal track. There's been some tweaks and rebalancing there in terms of how much role they play in the final mix. And I'm guessing they've, when they've gone back and listened, they've gone, oh, that was really great. Why didn't we use that more in the final mix last time? Those sorts of things. I think those could be real gems. But at the same time, like I said, I don't think the original record really needs this. It stands really strongly as it was. That being said, I'm keen to hear it from a vocal perspective. There's some details in the keyboards, the synthesizer keyboards. There's definitely some details there in the sonic quality that seem to be a little bit more. They're able to bring them up in the mix a little bit. I'm guessing the problem that they faced when they originally mixed and mastered this record was it was very dense and very big sounding, especially for the time, and they also managed to get it quite loud. And bearing in mind this is now hitting 2001, this is like everyone's starting to converge in the loudness wars, so records were starting to get louder and louder and louder, and it was starting to head towards its peak, which kind of peaked out in 2008. But at that time, I can imagine it being quite a chore to try to squeeze that record through two speakers, so to speak, and get it to play well on most systems, especially with the orchestration and things like that, because nobody had really done much in terms of it attempting that on that level, that scope, that size, that weight, that and clarity, as I said before, where the orchestral elements, they're not just a backing part, they're a key part. And without sacrificing the actual metal, the meat and potatoes of the metal crunch and punch, And they pulled it off really well, and that's why I don't think it necessarily needs a remix. But having had a listen to it, it's definitely more upfront, it's more punchy in a lot of regards. But I'm going to have to listen to the whole thing. I didn't think I was going to need to buy it, but having listened to that snippet. And I'll link that in the description, actually, that link to the Blessings Upon the Throne of Tyranny. I'll link that in the description. Go have a listen yourself and see what you make of it. But yeah, this could be one to own. Do you know what I mean? It could be one of those records where it's like, yeah, that's justified. I'll buy that again. And I think I'd still appreciate the original for what it was. And it may be that I still prefer it. I'm not sure until I listen to the whole thing in its entirety, the new remix and remastered version. But yeah, Dimmu Borgir is one of those bands. I mean, it kind of changed the course of music for me. I was quite disenfranchised, I guess, by what was going on in metal at the time. It was a time when new metal was kind of dominant, and I guess in terms of what was going on in MTV and going on in music magazines and things at the time. People like Korn and Limp Bizkit and stuff like that. That was all kind of dominating the press and dominating, as I said, MTV or any platform that would show videos. Of course, we didn't really have the same means when it came to online that we do today. And when I got introduced to Dimmu Borgir, and at a very similar time, Emperor, it was like a light at the end of the tunnel, because I was always into the peak 80s thrash of, say, for the likes of Metallica and Megadeth and that kind of thing. Those were always like my kind of favorites. There was other stuff I really enjoyed, but that was like my taste in metal centered around that. And there was a real European, this like British new wave heavy metal and kind of European like influences that are really evident on records like Master of Puppets and Ride the Lightning, Justice, Peace Cells, all that kind of stuff. And I hadn't heard that kind of musicality in a long time on a metal record that was kind of being pushed as, or hyped, I guess, and like marketed to people. Bearing in mind, and back in those days, you got your news from metal magazines, and that would be like, I don't know, Metal Hammer or something like that, or Kerrang. Sorry, I don't think much of Kerrang. Anyway, but I got introduced to it by a friend, and I think that's where you always find the best music, isn't it? You get it by word of mouth. Hey, check these guys out, I'll burn your CD. Or if you go back long enough, I'll make you a mixtape. Anyway, yeah, I got, just a mix CD, and it had a few Dimmu songs on it, and it had a mix of stuff from Enthroned Darkness Triumphant and all the way through to Puritanical Euphoric Myisanthropia, but it had like maybe 3 or 4 songs from each, and yeah, it just blew me away, because it was the musicality, it was the little borrowings of classical music that were filtering through into it that brought a, I don't know, sophistication, I guess, to what was being played, rather than it just being groove like 4/4, like just really just chugging along on the low strings, like like songs that you could write, you could just play on like 2 or 3 strings on your guitar. These guys they had skill, and they were clearly using it, but at the same time they weren't really showing off or anything like that. Like, black metal is not really known for, or symphonic black metal, it's challenging and it's musical, but in a different sense. There's no one's like showing off playing solos per se. And I mean, there were solos on Dimmu's 4th record, and I really enjoyed that, actually, because it had a nice balance. For me, it was a refreshing way to use solos and have it be more ambient again, and really lend itself to the song. And so I really enjoyed that on Spiritual Blackout Dimensions. But yeah, it seemed like in mainstream, all you had was like detuned, ultra detuned, groove laden stuff that was really simplistic and really dumbed down, which wasn't really my thing. You had the old bands, but then you had no one coming out new that was pushing it like music, in terms of musicality, in terms of orchestration and atmosphere as well. Like, I like a live sound, something that sounds like it's being played in an arena, or in a a theater or something like that. It sounds live. It sounds like an actual band being presented to you. And just a lot of the stuff that was going on in the US was just really dry. Everything was being made really dry to get it loud. And don't get me wrong, there's one or two things that I liked from the US, like System of a Down, for instance. Like, I don't like everything that they've done, but they seem to be a band that had a bit of integrity about them, and they did some really cool stuff. Especially if you just looking to like listen to it, at a party or something like that. That was fine. But for the most part, that scene wasn't really doing it for me. And like I said, I mean, like even Mudvayne, their first record, even the second one was not too bad, but the first one was pretty good, and I liked that it was a different spin, that it was a bass player who was effectively the lead player in the band. That was cool. It was a different twist, but it still wasn't scratching my itch. I liked complex chords and more melody, I suppose, in the music. And just coming across this record in particular just opened a whole gateway into new bands that I'd never heard, and that introduced me to, as I say, bands like Emperor. And it also introduced me to Immortal, and they ended up becoming those three in particular were like the cornerstone black metal bands for me. And like I said, I was always more into the symphonic stuff. I mean, I still like bands like Satyricon, for instance. I don't know what they've been doing more recently. I kind of fallen out of following them more recently, but it's still stuff I enjoyed. And that wasn't particularly on the symphonic side, if that makes sense. It was more raw. So I did enjoy that from time to time, but I was never into the really, really, really extreme kind of lo-fi bees in a tin stuff. But anyway, let me know what you think in the comments. Have you listened to the new release of Puritanical Euphoric Myisanthropia? Have you listened to it? And what do you think? Is it worth buying? Do you think I should get it? Do you think remasters and remixes and stuff like that are a worthwhile thing, or do you think it's just marketing and kind of bollocks? I don't know. Let me know in the comments, and I'll get chatting to you soon. Adios. Take care.